it's strange to me to see him kind of framing it as if I had these evil intentions.
It looks like there's a growing feud between Adam22 and Andrew Schultz. I think these two guys have had a problem with each other for quite a while. I would say since July 2022 when Andrew appeared on the No Jumper podcast. I'll play some parts of it throughout this video, and at the end you guys can give me the usual feedback and let me know if I'm reaching or if great minds think alike and there really is something to it. So it all started with this interview where a couple of questions from Adam seemed to annoy Schultz. The first one being around Brendan Schaub's Gringo Papi. Adam even addressed this recently where he speculated that this could have annoyed Schultz. Around the time of this interview, Schaub had recently blessed us with his second special, Gringo Papi, and everyone hated it. So Adam asking that question could have annoyed Schultz because what is he supposed to say here? He can't really be honest with his response. He can't say that he thought it was good comedy because 1, it would be a lie, and 2, he'd be mocked for saying that, and he can't say he thought it was terrible because it's his friend who is also good friends with Rogan. It's a lose-lose situation. To give Schultz some credit here, he seems to be very loyal to those who have helped him in his career. Brendan was actually the one who convinced Rogan to have Schultz on JRE, so he owes Brendan a lot. For this Adam22 question, there's no good answer, so Schultz kind of evades the question.
So, okay, so far we've talked about gang shootings, we've talked about abortion.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something that is perhaps even more disturbing.
Okay.
Gringo Papi. You and I.
You want some clips,
You
boy.
and I are both friends.
YouTube clips.
We will explain. He and I are both friends of Brendan Schaub.
Yeah, shouts to Brendan.
Former
Love
UFC
you, Brendan.
fighter, current comedian and podcaster. I know you see it. People, for some reason, they want anyone associated with Brendan Schaub to speak out against him because they don't like his comedy special. What is your attitude on
Who
this?
is they to you?
The Redditors.
Yes, he has a Reddit page that is like is massive.
It will make you scared to have a Reddit.
Schultz even calls out Adam a little bit and says he just wants some YouTube clips. He even asks Adam if he was really friends with Brendan, and of course Adam says no. So Schultz is kind of signaling to Adam that, you know, I see what you did there. You're saying you and Schultz are both friends with Brendan in a way to make the Gringo Papi question seem more natural. Whether or not Adam realized that it would be a crappy question for Schultz to try and answer is up for debate. I think he likely knew what he was doing. At the same time, Gringo Papi is the worst rated comedy special of all time, so you could make the argument that it's a relevant question to ask. But there was another question that Adam22 asked, which I think you can visibly see that it bothered Schultz.
This is a question that I really wanted to throw out there. Andrew, you've been criticized most recently by Joe Budden. People like to claim that Andrew Schultz kind of like used hip hop to get his career off the ground. And Joe Budden said basically that
he wants a shout out for me so
you
bad,
were a
bro.
culture vulture and that you use like the Charlemagne cosign to basically get yourself some level of relevance, and now you're doing the Flagrant thing, which is not hip hop. Was this ever part of the plan? Were you ever like, this will be a great way to infiltrate the black community?
No, I don't think it was an elaborate plan. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
He just mad at you?
Say again?
He just mad at you?
No, I don't know. I don't know what his whole deal is.
You see Andrew, his mouth crooked to the side is something.
Yeah,
he don't want to
Because
say.
he knows he's winning, that he's even getting this kind of commentary from Joe Budden.
I don't know if this was a hot topic at the time, but it did seem a little out of the blue. The question of Schultz being a culture vulture, I can see how you can make the case. I would say it's a little bit of a reach. Charlemagne definitely helped Schultz get to where he is today with their podcast, and Schultz's own Flagrant podcast, which he started around the same time, is now substantially much bigger. So maybe Joe Budden feels like Schultz used Charlemagne and hip-hop culture to get him where he is today. It's an interesting argument. You guys let me know what you think about that. I have noticed that Andrew changes the way he speaks when he's in different spaces. If you compare how he is on Brilliant Idiots to when he's on Rogan, or even compare him on the No Jumper podcast to him on Flagrant, he'll tend to use more Black American vernacular. I don't know if I'm describing that correctly, but you guys know where I'm going with this. It's very slight, and you'd only notice this if you've watched a few of his Flagrant podcasts. I actually would let Schultz off the hook for that, because I think it's a natural thing to do. Schultz being in a more urban environment, sometimes it's just natural for that to rub off. When I speak to my friends in the UK, I sound more British compared to when I speak to my American friends. Also, New York City is a very diverse place. Hip-hop culture is a big part of New York culture in general. The accusation of Schultz using the black community, I'm I'm sure has been a critique of his, and so Adam bringing that up, I think triggered him deep down. Adam even brings up some negative subreddit comments about Andrew prioritizing Flagrant over Brilliant Idiots. So it does seem like Adam was a bit more blatant in his intention for getting some juicy content. Towards the end of the podcast, Schultz was roasting Adam a lot. Maybe this was his way of getting him back. If you watch the full episode, it looks like Adam wasn't really enjoying it. Now, of course, that could just be harmless banter, but the reason I mention this is because about a year later, Adam22 has Steiny from the Nelk Boys on his podcast, and the way he spoke about Schultz was like there was already some bad blood there. Also, for those of you who might not know, I briefly spoke about the Steiny situation in my last video. You should check that out to get more details. Long story short, there was a very awkward episode between him and Steiny on the Full Send podcast. So in this next clip, Steiny is giving his take on that situation with Schultz.
As the person being interviewed, it's kind of like assumed that even if you think that the questions that you're being asked are sort of dumb or lame or whatever, that you're just going to kind of roll with the punches, right? And it's like that was kind of like the vibe, is that he just wasn't like happy with the quality of the interview, which I feel you, but at the same time, like if you do an interview and you're kind of surprised that the person interviewing you doesn't know as much about you as you might have expected, to me, you just.
But that didn't even seem like his biggest qualm, like, because like Steve wasn't talking at all, and all he was doing was praising Steve.
You know what's funny about Andrew, and I love Andrew for the record, but like.
So you're siding with him?
But one of the accusations about him that I've seen, I saw like one of these fucking comedy commentary channels like make a video about this the other day, but basically like saying that Andrew plays like a fake version of himself on the podcast where he thinks that everything that everybody says on Flagrant is fucking hilarious or brilliant. So it's like that, like, he gets some criticism for that. I don't know how widespread that criticism is. So basically, like, people will say that Andrew plays like an exaggerated version of himself on Flagrant, which I myself have kind of noticed that, like, sometimes I'll notice him like laughing, and it's like he thinks that the joke is funnier than the joke actually is, but it's okay because it's a podcast and it's like you got to keep the energy going and everything. But I kind of felt like your exchange with him there was like the exact opposite of that. Like he kind of like chose to like take a more negative, you know, side of things, which I'm not really like used to that from him.
Okay, so at this point, it seems clear that Adam has a bit of an issue with Schultz, as he clearly took some light jabs at him. Maybe he just agrees with Steiny and doesn't like the way that Andrew carried himself in that situation. I certainly think that Schultz came off a little self-centered in that podcast. He could have been having a bad day, who knows. So recently on Flagrant with DJ Academics, Schultz talked about his episode with Adam22. Schultz explains that Adam basically has an agenda with what he wants to get out of a podcast. He directly compares interview styles and makes out that Adam is more cynical when it comes to his podcast questions.
Bro, I did an episode of what's it called? And he had the YouTube clip questions lined up. Like we're all No Jumper, and I thought that we're kind of cool. And he had the title in the questions, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh wow, the most important thing here, because I thought we were like cool, not like boys or nothing, but I thought we were cool enough, whatever. And I was like, okay, you came in here, you know what your title got to be for this podcast, you know what the clips got to be for the podcast, and I'm like, okay, now I understand who you are. Anything that serves you and continues to succeed within this business, this is going to be a good thing, and we're going to go and we're going to push on it. I don't hate on it because I like knowing where people stand. I like knowing what people's intentions are. I operate a little different. You are on this podcast right now. If there's something from this pod you're like, yo, I don't want out, I'm cutting it.
Yeah.
I'm cutting it. Adam's not cutting it.
After seeing this, Adam responds on his No Jumper podcast, and you can tell at this point, it's like he's on the defense.
Of course.
I didn't really feel like asking Andrew Schultz about the thing with Brendan Schaub was really that big of a deal. I feel like it's like what I did in that instance was like the most normal thing you could possibly do as an interviewer. So it's strange to me to see him kind of framing it as if I had these evil intentions, especially since he did the right thing. And he just basically gave me kind of like a non-answer. There was another clip where he basically broke down how Joe Rogan had to spend a shitload of money in order to appear on Flagrant 2. And then we ended up titling it like, I forget, like how much Joe Rogan had to spend to get on Flagrant 2. So, like, which is, it's kind of misleading because he spent the money on the travel and the transportation and the fact that he could have been doing other things with his time. is a little bit of a spicy title, but that other clip got like 2 million views.
Yeah, man.
So it clearly worked. Although I
facts,
can
man.
kind of understand how, Andrew Schultz might have felt some kind of way
what's
about
crazy
us
too, though?
mixing it up a little bit.
What he mentioned with the Rogan 50K thing, I doubt that would upset Schultz. I think he's kind of deflecting a little bit with that. I did think there was something interesting about that clip. Schultz brings up how much Rogan probably spent to appear on his podcast, and I guess it's an interesting fact, but it's also a flex.
I mean, when he came and did our podcast, I'm just making an assumption here. It probably cost him tens of thousands of dollars.
Because he flies private?
I imagine he's flying private. He's flying multiple people there. He's flying security. He's taking a day off probably from doing his podcast.
Yep.
He's putting everybody up in hotels. Like, that's how, I don't know. He's just the man. He's the most
Damn,
generous
that's
fucker.
damn.
He's the
I've
realest
never
motherfucker.
low-key,
You
low-key
can't
was-
say nothing bad about Joe.
Although,
Bullshit.
to be fair,
Yeah, that's bossy. Because when you see it
if
like
he
that,
spent
you're like, oh,
to be fair,
shit.
if Joe Rogan spent 30 grand to get there that day, that would probably be like me going to the store and buying a 6-piece chicken McNugget.
I think probably minimum 50,000.
You think minimum?
Between like, you remember he has security that he
Everybody.
flies around. It's like everything. He's feeding all these guys. They're there in New York City at a very nice hotel, probably with multiple people he's got to get rooms for. Like
50
this
grand
is-
at a certain point when you're living a certain way is not that much.
I don't know if Adam recognized it as him bragging, but he kind of shoots it down and says 50K is hardly anything to Rogan, which kind of rains on his parade. If you've seen how much Schultz idolizes Rogan, you'll get it. He's gotten into arguments with Charlemagne about how awesome Rogan is. So when Adam says 50K isn't that much for Rogan, it's kind of like saying, calm down, mate, it's not that deep. He doesn't love you that much. In fact, no one loves you that much, apart from your backup dancers. Just kidding. He just sold out MSG twice, so a lot of people do in fact love Schultz and his haircut. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. There's been a lot of back and forth here. I think it's fair to say there's been some passive aggressive comments to say the least. If you enjoyed this, make sure to hit the like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.